Alright, I'll see you in a bit, Ilwick. You have a wonderful night. A black metal horse reared from the prow of the Camertage, a masterpiece of Ottoman-style power, powered by a new type of Persian engine. It ran from Istanbul through the Persian Empire and all the way to the British frontier city of Kabul. I was sorry to be leaving Tehran, a place of true possibility. Still, the Camertage left us in no doubt that we were leaving. Its engines fired, and we rocketed away along the rails. Tell me about Kabul. Kabul to Herat. What about to Quetta? One of the Armenian porters nudged his Pashtun friend and muttered something uncomplimentary as he watched me struggle to load our things into the luggage car. I focused upon my task, but they continued to stare at me in discourteous fascination. "You look very strange for a servant," said the Armenian fellow, whose name turned out to be Abadjan. I looked the man level in the eye. "Well, I'm perfect, a la mode," I told them in aggrieved tones, pulling my cuff straight. "They are all wearing this in Paris this year." They only laughed pityingly in response. Monsieur Abadjan tucked a purple lamb's wool pashmina around my neck. "Perhaps this will help," he said rather hopelessly. I stroked the soft fabric as I returned to my compartment. Mr. Fogg made no comment, distracted by the whistles and shouts which marked our departure from Tehran. In Colombo. I woke to the gentle rumble of the train and dressed quickly, deciding to tie my scarf around my neck in dashing style. Monsieur Abadjan was entirely correct in his sartorial assessment. The color suited my complexion very well. Mr. Fogg took one look at me and raised an eyebrow. "Very vibrant," he remarked. "It was a gift," I said with a smile. "You do," he said dryly, "have a great facility for making friends." Do I catch a wistfulness in his tone? The thought shocked me. Did my cold-blooded master wish himself more gregarious? I could scarcely credit it. "So do you, monsieur," I lied stoutly, though my master tended to accumulate whist partners and passing acquaintances rather than friends. Was his only reply, before he turned away and fixed his attention upon the passing scenery until the Camertage pulled into Herat, and the border of the Persian Empire and the frontier of British Indian colonial lands. Bleh. We had our papers inspected by Persian customs officers. Let's try again. We had our papers inspected by a Persian customs officer with a pair of magnificent extending spectacles, made of polished brass and engraved with Farsi script along the arms. He inspected our documents while turning a small lever behind his ear. A pair of smoked glass lenses slipped over the clear ones, and he inspected our documents once more. "You are widely traveled," he remarked. "We are traveling around the world," I blurted, and could nearly hear my master refrain from rolling his eyes. "Oh, well, it's none of my business," the official remarked philosophically. "Your papers are in orders. Good luck with your travels." We repeated much the same experience with the British customs official a few hours later, and so we arrived at Kabul, thoroughly inspected and officially stamped. Boom! Calcutta, Urban Travel, Englishman's Wardrobe. Oops, I meant to prepare. As we explored the city, we were rather unceremoniously seized up by a score of British infantry and marched along the walls of Kabul, up the mountain ridge, and to the fortress of Bala Hissar. Monsieur Fogg protested our treatment, and I joined my voice to his, though my outraged tone rather outmatched his calm ones. We were presented to a small bespectacled gentleman in a palatial office which looked rather more like a court, despite the piles of books and surveyor's equipment littering the floor. He gave us a glance over his spectacle rims. I am Mr. Smith, second assistant political officer to the British mission here. I do not have the pleasure of your acquaintance. I glanced at my master, who straightened his cuffs, but otherwise looked as though he might have been out for a mid-morning stroll, and he had wandered by merest happenstance into an Afghan palace fort. I am Mr. Phileas Fogg, and this is my valet, Passepartout. I am a subject of Her Majesty and passing through Kabul with no small urgency. Urgency? The political officer's eyes flashed behind his lenses. Pray expand a little upon the nature of this urgency, Mr. Fogg. I did not like his tone and gave him a sidelong glare for a good measure. Mr. Fogg was not used to being on the other side of the interrogation table, and I felt rather protective of him as Mr. Fogg explained his wager and our resultant breakneck trip around the world. I could see Smith growing more astonished with each word. Finally, he took off his glasses and tapped them on the table. Were you Russian or Persian spies, he said musingly, you would have found a more plausible story. You go too far, sir, I broke in, abandoning common sense. My master is an Englishman, through and through. He probably dreams of Queen Victoria every night. Mr. Smith's eyebrows raised in an eerie mirroring of my master's expression, and then he cleared his throat. A friend of mine is traveling to Omsk. I'd consider it a great favor if you accompanied her. Omsk is quite far, I hedged. Yes, but at Omsk you can catch the Trans-Siberian Express all the way to Usurisk, or change at Karimskaya for Beijing, he explained. Think on it. He dismissed us and returned to his papers without a second glance. Quite a commanding fellow for a mere second assistant political officer. Ugh. Quite frankly, we've been fucking around for a little too long here. So let's explore and see if we can't find a better route through the Middle East, like this car. Oh god. I spent a few hours in exploration learning ways in which we might travel onwards. And quite frankly, I don't want to go back to India, so let's go ahead and go to Omsk. We met the friend of Monsieur Smith, Her Majesty's second assistant political officer in Kabul, at the airship dock. She was wearing a daring red dress cut in the Italian style, draped over the mink coat lined in satin. I greeted her with a bow, and she swept her eyes over Mr. Fogg and myself before inclining her head. Where did Smith dig you two up? She asked rhetorically in the plumbing tones of an English aristocrat. Never mind, I'm Lady Sybil. With that she swept away, leaving me to manage both our bags and left her own assortment of traveling cases. We barely had time to settle into our cabin before the little Schutlans airship jolted into the air, further evidence of the German Empire's heavy investment in Afghanistan's infrastructure. The first day's travel was quiet enough, drifting idly across mountaintops. I attended my master, ignoring the needs of Lady Sybil in favor of a starched collar, a trimmed mustache, and a cup of tea at just the right temperature. Night fell and stars lit up the sky. Lady Sybil joined me in looking at them, pointing up at one. The dolphin, she remarked. It's the only constellation I know. And why is that, madame? I asked, feeling there must be a story attached. But she only shrugged. It actually looks like a dolphin. It is so rare for things to look like what they truly are, don't you find? With that cryptic remark, she left me. We were boarded by a half-dozen Imperial Russian customs inspectors a few hundred miles into their airspace. Lady Sybil came to me as they checked the pilot's papers. Someone tipped them off. They were watching for me, she searched my face. Tell them I have traveled with you from London. Of course, I answered. Gallant? Foolish? I cannot be sure. She smiled thinly as a knock sounded on the door. I can see you are a good man. I'm better than you realize, I replied. Another knock sounded on the door, much brisker this time. I considered Lady Sybil. Who was this woman? Was her mission true, or was that another lie? Lady Sybil shot me a last pleading look before the customs inspector brought in Monsieur Fogg and began their interrogation through a translator. Finally, the question came. Do you know this woman? I stepped forward before Mr. Fogg could open his mouth and said, She is our companion, I said boldly. We have traveled together from London in pursuit of my master's wager. The officials gave Lady Sybil a bit of a leer, drawing their own sordid conclusions about her position in our company. I put one arm around the lady to further their suspicions, and at that they took a decision as to my character and hence the ladies and gave the matter up. They completed their search of the hold and cabins and disembarked by nightfall. We had lost a day, but nothing more serious. Yesterday's events loosened both Lady Sybil's tongue and her thickly painted facade. I'm not really a titled lady, she confessed over lunch in which an altogether more common accent. Grew up in Whitechapel, I did. How did you get involved in this? My dad was a coachmaker till the Artificers Guild put him out of business. I took to pickpocketing for Ma and Dad, and one day I picked the wrong pocket. She reached for another leg of chicken and devoured it artlessly. James's, that is Smith's pocket. He recruited me instead of turning me in. How old were you? 11. You have been a spy for 15 years, give or take, I exclaimed, forgetting the impropriety of remarking upon a lady's age. I'm going to be a countess now. That's my mission. Lady Sybil laughed at my expression. One of the Tsar's close confidants is looking for a wife, and James has found him Lady Sybil. You sound confident. Smith says the Count's half Italian, so he should be easy to manage, she said flippantly before her lips thinned. I'll manage him. It's my duty. Something in my face must have given me away, for Lady Sybil's expression softened. Oh, Passepartout, you're not a knob. I didn't peg you for a romantic. Well, I'm a Frenchman, I said it automatically, though my voice lacked the proper archness. We are born romantics. I could think of nothing else to do but wish her luck. She took her leave as we tethered the ship at Omsk, with the suggestion that we might stop by the governor's house and tell him of our adventures. I imagine her sometimes as a pickpocket countess, spying for the crown. I wonder whether she still thinks of a bespectacled second assistant political officer in Kabul. I do not ever think about her condemned to a Tsarist jail. We boarded the Trans-Siberian Express at Omsk station and settled into our seats. The lines are thick here, and other trains pass ours frequently. Some are filled with settlers and others with soldiers, packed into 5th and 6th class cars so closely that I wonder if they can even breathe. I saw a darker train go past, metal cars with iron gratings that seemed to cast shadows as it moved. It was a prison train, bound for nowhere. The criminals aboard were simply carried backwards and forwards across the mountains, always moving, never stopping. I saw children's faces held up to the light. The prisoners are allowed to take their families with them. Whether that is a mercy or a worse punishment for a good conscience, I cannot tell. We crossed the halfway mark of our journey today. In the morning we wound up the Angara Valley towards the mining camp of Irkutsk, the great city of Siberia, where some passengers were leaving to join routes south into Mongolia. We waited while the luggage was unloaded by leisurely porters and rough-clad moujiks until the whistle blew and the train's engines wound up once more. Our journey continued, and by afternoon we had reached the magnificent expanse of Lake Baikal, as clear as the finest crystal, bounded by flower-banked cliffs on the western shore and containing a thriving, raucous population of freshwater seals. The track ended at the lake's edge, but the great train showed no signs of slowing or stopping. I began to feel, as my master would say, a little perturbed. Now, my friends, this next sentence will seem to you the invention of a madman, but I assure you it is utter, unvarnished truth. We drove straight from the shore onto the clear water of the lake, barely causing a ripple. I looked out of the compartment window and saw the wheels pulled up, and zut alors, the train was hovering in the air through some unseen mechanism. We stretched our legs as we made the crossing, and Monsieur Fogg seemed much replenished by the unrivaled views. From the windows, I watched families working at their fields, dressed in colors bright as harlequins, red and blue bodices and bright bandanas, which they pulled off to wave at the train. People are wonderful. They live somewhere bleak and then make themselves colorful instead. There is little report of the outside world, so a word today on Russian eating habits, more specifically the Russian distaste for regular meal times. I met a fellow Frenchman today who said to me, "The Russian meal is a guide to the Russian character." I begged him to explain further, and he obliged me. The guiding principle of the national cuisine is that all dishes must be capable of being served at any time the eater feels disposed. He sacrifices his finer susceptibilities to his love of freedom. I resolved to keep this thought in mind on future approaches to the dining car. If our locomotive suppers are not triumphs of culinary art, they are at least signal examples of logistical achievement. We pulled in Karimskaya. In the evening, from Karimskaya, it was possible to branch onto the Chinese Eastern Railway to Beijing, so we disembarked upon the platform. We watched the train pull away, and I knew I would miss the hot water, the leather seats, and the gentle rocking of the carriage. Let's see. I think we'll go to Beijing in 2 days. We could probably go to Pyongyang. 2 days. Negotiate. No charges. Excellent. Tomorrow, we'll explore a bit. Ooh. I walked the streets a while, discovering the possibilities for how we might make progress. And then we'll hotel. There was no moon at Karimskaya, and not even a barking dog marred the silence of the luminous Siberian night. The only lit building bore the copperly of the Artificers' Guild. I knocked at the back door, eager to find company to help pass the long, cold night. A dwarf with long black hair, rouged lips, and thick brass goggles opened the door. I bowed and introduced myself as a foreigner to Karimskaya, looking for conversation. "Welcome. Come in out of the cold, then. I'm Nadezhda Yefimova." We walked through a squalid corridor into a round room lit with bright electrical lamps. The artificers sprawled on low sofas and greeted me with beery enthusiasm. A human form automaton ushered me to a seat and handed me a drink with a mechanical precision. I accepted my drink with a grin. and the small gears in the automaton's face whirred to produce an answering smile. The hours passed quickly in good company, and we shared many outlandish tales. I gave them my artificer's medallion, and they all hushed. It seems you have done our guild a service in the past, Nadezhda smiled. What can we do for you? I asked for help with my journey, and then conferred in Russian for a few minutes before nodding. From Batavia, you can reach Lima in 15 days, by submersible to Brisbane and airship from there. I think it's the quickest way across the Pacific. I thank them for their generosity and wended my way back through the dark streets of Krymskaya, a city lit only by the brightness of the stars and the pale, ethereal glow of the northern lights. Ooh. We boarded a Chinese steam train at Krymskaya station. It was a smooth journey until we reached Zabaikalsk, where there was a change of gauge from the Russian to the Chinese rail. To relieve the tedium of waiting, I brought my master tea. In the Russian style. Black with a slice of lemon. Mr. Fogg made a valiant effort before pushing it fastidiously to one side. Aw. Poor baby. We restarted our journey a few hours later, only for it to be again interrupted by Chinese customs officials at Manzhouli. They were as brusque as the Russian officials. Clearly, the bonds of bureaucracy overrode those of nation. They stamped our papers with the square ivory seals, leaving a distinctive red cinnabar mark. Today we reached Mukden, famed for the Qing Imperial Palace. Alas, there was no time for exploration, for here our train divided, half going west to Pyongyang, and the other half turning east to Beijing. I spent this day attending Monsieur Fogg, who had managed to find a week-old English periodical which proposed a new fashion of tying one's cravat. I ventured that a gentleman must be a la mode, and of the latest style. Monsieur Fogg, considering my opinion thoughtfully, though he kept casting subtle pained glances towards my own assuredly fashionable apparel, indeed, he said at length. I practiced the new cravat tying technique before bed. A gentleman can never be too prepared. We reached Pyongyang in the dark. I could see little of the platform, much less of the city. The soldiers guarding the station seemed nervous and unfed. Mr. Fogg seemed not to notice the tension of the air. But I had a presentiment of unpleasantness that would not leave me. My friends, I am not a superstitious man, but I felt a chill that night. We shared a carriage to our hotel with a group of talkative Protestant missionaries who blessed us at great and exhaustive length before we managed to escape to our beds. As I drifted to sleep, I wondered what Pyongyang would look like in the morning light. Let's see. 2 days. Tomorrow. We'll explore for 4 hours. Pyongyang was a battleground between competing groups of Chinese and Japanese businessmen. The Koreans seemed to regard both sides with wariness, and European faces even more so. There were a surprising number of Americans on the streets, but then Americans, so it was said, were perennially drawn to opportunities for commerce. After all my concerns upon my arrival, the city turned out to have a most restful and charming atmosphere. Air thick with the smell of frying river mullets, school children swatting at each other with colorful umbrellas, women in chimajigori shopping and fluttering silk flans at their bows. Even my master summoned a remark upon its, as he put it, adequacy. Let's see, and that was, we didn't hotel. Before retiring, I helped the kitchen staff to clean, earning £65 in fees and tips. Captain Choi Song-ran gave us a hard stare. "You are not Americans, are you?" he asked. "Assuredly not, Captain," I told him. "I am a Frenchman, and my master is so English his flesh is practically made of roast beef." Captain Choi looked disconcerted, but let us board his steam yacht, bound for Manila, without any further trouble. First Mate Matapang, a serious-faced Filipina, gasped when she saw us. "You are not American, are you?" she inquired anxiously. "We already told the captain we were not," I told her tiredly. "I am not surprised he asked. The captain fought for the Americans at the Battle of Gongwa last year." "Gongwa last year," she said quietly. "He lost his brother when they took the fort." "I'm sorry for his grief," I said, and she sighed gustily. "He will recover in time," she said. "In the meantime, we must continue on." Captain Choi did not come to see us off when we put into Manila's harbor. I did not begrudge him the discourtesy. Tomorrow at 9. Tomorrow at 9 it is. We arrived at the Spanish-governed capital of Manila at a most inopportune time. The city had recently suffered the depredations of a major typhoon, and the efforts at rebuilding had been stalled by an outbreak of the dreaded cholera morbus. Images of San Roque, a saint invoked against pestilence, decorated almost every building and vehicle, but to little effect. Infected establishments were burned daily by the sanitary board, with our hotel one of the casualties. We relocated near to the telephone exchange, taking the mechanical horse-pulled tram. Concerned with the possibility of infection, I ensured that Monsieur Fogg ate only from kitchens which had avoided all traces of the disease. From our window I could see carts piled high with the dead being taken to the mountain to be burned rather than interred in a churchyard, which put me in a morbid frame of mind. I went to the local telegraph office and sent a message. "To a dear friend, in Paris. My ex-lover. Fine, to be perfectly honest. We parted in unfortunate circumstances, and I felt I needed to apologize for my behavior. I was something of a libertine in my youth, I must admit. I made my way back to the hotel under the fragrant coconut oil lamps, eager to part from the city riven by sickness and death.